Hello, and welcome back to the Northern Lights Sportscast. We are back after a long absence here to talk about the NHL and NBA playoffs and all that entails the craziness of both of those leagues. And I have Dash and Cody back with me here. We're going to jump right into talking about the NHL playoffs, and we're going to start with the Western Conference. So we're a little late to the ball on talking about this a little bit, but we're actually already into the conference finals. So the two teams that have been produced in the Western Conference are the Dallas Stars and the Vegas Golden Knights. We're going to kind of talk about how each team got here. So do we want to start with Dallas? Guys, what are your thoughts on Dallas's path to the conference finals?
One man and one.
Go ahead.
One man and one man only, and it's kind of like back in 2020. It's Jake Ottinger again. I mean, this defense has not been great at all. It's been Ottinger mostly having to carry this team. They've been having trouble scoring at times, but it seems like they've gotten better at that throughout these playoffs. And but again, like I said, Ottinger is a big reason why they are where they are right now. They had to get through the Wild in 6 games, even after losing game one in overtime, and then they had to go through 7 games with the Kraken. So they've definitely had a tough road to get here, but they are here now.
Yeah. Cody, thoughts?
All I was really going to say, it's kind of like a rocky road so far for them. It was Wild. Sorry. It was the Wild had kind of gave them a good fight in the beginning of the first round. I actually watched that series a lot since I had free time. But the Wild gave them some challenges, especially with their star player getting hurt in the very first game. And but Dash is right. Ottinger has really kind of stepped up again for them in these last couple of games. I was a little surprised the Wild made it to 6 games. I heard many times that it was going to be just like 5 games at most. The Stars would kind of take the Wild, and that would be it. But then they've been having difficulties versus the Kraken too with taking it to 7 games.
Yeah. All right. I'll speak a little bit, I guess, on this. I've wanted to talk about this for weeks. So, Cody, I know what you were going from. You probably remember hearing me talking about before the series began and how I was dreading it. Because the Wild never cease to fail. Well, they never cease to amaze me how badly they fail every year. So I had thought purely based on that they would just screw it up and not be able to do anything. But instead, the Wild came out swinging and even had a 2-1 lead. And then they blew it, of course.
Just a repeat of last year against St. Louis.
It really is. Yep. It really is. So this is yet again, 3rd year. Well, I don't know. I look at the last few years differently for the Wild. I mean, like 2 years ago when they played the Golden Knights in round 1, they were down and out, and then they won 2 straight games to force a Game 7. And then last year, they just failed epically against the Blues. Didn't the Wild get... Was it a 2v3 again last year, Dash? Do you remember? I'm forgetting already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
2v3 matchup, and we had the 2, so the Wild had home ice to begin the series, and they still couldn't do it. This time, they actually took a game from Dallas in Game 1 in overtime. Dash remembers getting up at 2 a.m. and hearing I was still awake watching that game. But
I was still watching that game, and I don't really watch hockey that much. that should surprise people.
Yeah, exactly. But there was a lot of hope in that series, more than I had previously thought, especially after they won Game 1. It felt like Minnesota's series to lose rather than Dallas' series to win. And when it counted, Dallas came up big. Like Dash said, Ottinger was the prime player in that series. Really, the goalies in general determined that series completely because...
Well, my one question I would say is who was the goalie for the Wild in Game 1 that did awesome?
Gustafsson.
And he did awesome in Game 1. He kept it and helped them win the game. But then they switched to Fleury in Game 2, and Dallas scores 7 goals.
Yeah, and then they switched back in Game 3 and won.
Yeah,
no.
it is.
Yeah, we did win. Yeah.
I think Fleury was the only game too. That was the only game he played. I
No,
thought.
he came in or after Gustafson allowed 6 goals. I think it was in game 4 or 5. One of the two.
No. Dallas only scored 4 or 3 in game or the rest of the games. But I would say Gustafson was the goalie that did better, and I was surprised they switched to Fleury in game 2. But
Yeah.
Fleury's had more experience. That's probably why they did it. But it's just kind of showed that after the Wild had like a triumphant game 1, it just gets obliterated with a 7-goal game 2 for the Stars.
Yeah, I felt that didn't have much bearing on the rest of the series. The Stars each team was going to win a home game. I knew that. It wasn't like one of the other series that we saw later in the playoffs where it seemed like neither home team could win a home game. They were going to win home games. It was just going to be which tipping point games were going to go in which team's way. All right, let's move on to a different series where neither of us have personal implications, unless you have final thoughts, Dash.
And speaking of those kind of series, I was going to bring up the kind of the disappointment, or the biggest disappointment that came out of the West this year, probably Colorado. I mean, the one thing, though, about them, the thing is, though, it's disappointing, but it's not like, I'm not going to say that they flat out choked, because the problem was with them, they had so many players injured heading into these playoffs. They lost their captain for the entire season. I mean, and they also lost a lot of players from last year, too. They lost Darcy Kemper. So they were kind of beat up heading into this series, and it honestly doesn't surprise me too much that Seattle was able to beat them, but it definitely is a slap in the face for a team that won the cup last year.
Yeah,
it was it's their chance to like go defend, and they lose in game 1, like round 1. Sorry.
Yeah,
losing in 7 games, they took it to the brink, but lost 2-1 in game 7
to a team that was in their first year of the playoffs as a franchise, only their second year. And the only reason I'm not upset with Seattle is because it's their second year, not their first. So, good for Seattle. In fact, I was hoping they'd beat the Stars, and of course they couldn't in Game 7. But that was a close game.
No, and that was just that was a weird series. It was like both teams just defensively shut down. There was a lot of high-scoring games. There were certain games that were blowouts, and then Game 7 just seemed like both offenses couldn't do anything until it was way too late.
Exactly. Yeah, Cody and I were watching that game the other night, and we saw Dallas score, and
early.
No, it was in the second period. They were
I meant the first goal.
Yeah,
late in the second period. And then Dallas got another one with like 5 minutes left, and then Seattle got a goal with 30 seconds left on the empty net.
Yeah, but just kind of disappointing in in my perspective. In Dallas's perspective, they're doing exactly what a lot of people thought they could do this year.
Well, and you know why they're going far.
Peter DeBoer.
Well, you know why they're going far. Yeah, Peter DeBoer.
Yeah.
New team every year with a brand new team. He will take them on a deep playoff run, at least to the conference finals. It doesn't fail.
Yeah. And I was hoping to prove that wrong this year, but so close, but so far.
So when are the Leafs going to hire him?
Good question.
I mean, they would do a lot for a deep playoff run, so I don't know.
Yeah, hey, but, they got the one. They got the one this year.
Yeah, but maybe DeBoer, I mean, we don't know. I mean, the Stars got one more series to go. Who knows what could happen in that? Maybe he can take them all the way this year.
Yeah.
But then another series to talk about, which was on the other side of the bracket here, which both these teams are now done. The Oilers and the Kings.
Yes.
That was a bonkers series because Los Angeles won 2 of the first 3 games, but both of those games that they won in this series were in overtime. The Oilers just could not win an overtime game. They dominated the series overall. It's just those overtime games really put them behind, and everybody was wondering if they were just going to get bounced in the first round because of that. But thankfully, they were able to get their stuff together, scored a lot of goals in this series, and they come out winning at 6.
Yeah. Yep, that was definitely... It was more of an interesting series than the other one on that side of the bracket.
Yep.
I was going to say, like, the last 3 games, Edmonton, 5 goals. Game 5 got 6 goals. Game 6 got 5 goals. They figured it out at the end there.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, Edmonton should. They have some of the best talents in McDavid and Draisaitl, there's no way they should have problem scoring goals.
Yeah.
But then that took us, yeah.
Yeah, we'll just talk briefly, about the Knights and Jets series, so that we can eventually talk about the Oilers again. Vegas won in 5 games. Which game did Winnipeg win again? Was it one of their home games?
It was game
Very
one.
first one.
It was
Oh, it
game
was.
one. Yep, game one in Vegas.
Oh, that's right, because we were convinced that they were there. That we thought, oh, maybe Winnipeg will throw the upset. That did not happen.
Yeah, Vegas just took that series over immediately after
Yeah.
that. And the only series, ironically enough, the only series in the first round that ended in less than 6 games.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah. I feel like Vegas has flown under the radar this year, especially in the playoffs. There's been a lot more
aren't
other
they the number one
stories.
seed though?
No, Colorado.
They are, but
they're
I
the
mean,
overall. Yeah, you're right.
Well,
yeah, they are
they're the
overall.
Pacific one, but
They had a better record.
the thing is, it's like they got a new hire in Bruce Cassidy this year, and I honestly think it's a great hire. The Bruins got rid of him for whatever reason, and I mean, he's doing very well now in Vegas. And the thing is, they don't have this persona of like making the big splash moves to get themselves known. They're just kind of flying under the radar, being a solid team, and just doing it that way. And that, I think, is what has helped them this year.
Yeah. They really haven't caught anybody's ire this year compared to previous years. I mean, for crying out loud, one of their players that I remember I disliked during the Wild Golden Knight series a couple years back actually plays for the Wild now. So they've kind of given away some of their players that maybe were a little more drew ire from fans. But and speaking of the Knights and Oilers, they played in the conference semis. And despite the fact that the Oilers claim 3 out of the top 5 points takers in this year's playoffs, they lose in 6 games.
I mean, again, it's it's a step back from last year. There's no doubt about it. I honestly thought after Colorado got eliminated, I thought the Oilers were the best team in the West and probably shoo-ins for the Cup, at least to reach the Cup from the West. But yeah, this is just a very disappointing series by them, and it seemed like the offense, had to carry this team here. I mean, the defense has struggled all year. It was kind of like last year too. The goaltending was an issue, defense was an issue, so it had to be like they had to score a ton just to stay alive, and it was kind of the same thing this year, and they just couldn't do it that much this time around.
Yeah.
Well, they kept it close until because the series was tied at Game 4, but then after Game 4, it was just Vegas all the way.
Yep.
Yeah, and that series obviously produced Vegas. So Vegas and Dallas, they already played Game 1. I think did Dallas or Vegas win Game 1? I don't remember.
Nope, nobody played yet. This is tonight's game right now
mind.
is the first game of the conference rounds.
Yeah,
Carolina and the Panthers.
Okay, all right. It was the NBA that played them. I mixed that up. All right, now we're gonna move to the other side of the playoffs in the NHL. We're gonna move to the Eastern Conference. Where none of us have personal attachments, so we can't claim bias to any of these.
I'm kidding.
We'll start with the one that everyone was talking about for the longest time. The winningest team in NHL history, the Boston Bruins, lost to the Florida Panthers in 7 games. In such spectacular fashion. Whichever you guys want to start talking about this, go ahead.
I'll let you dash.
I mean, this has got to be one of the kind of funniest playoff losses I think I've ever seen in the NHL. I mean, we all remember back in 2019 when the Lightning broke the record for most wins in the regular season, and they got swept by Columbus in the first round, and we all thought that was one of the greatest playoff chokes of all time. This one might even top that.
Yeah.
I mean, considering the Bruins had a 3-1 series lead, and they were a breakaway in Game 5 away from ending it there in Game 5 at the end of regulation, but they missed the shot, and Florida ended up capitalizing.
Gosh.
And the fact too, like I mentioned earlier with Bruce Cassidy, they fired Bruce Cassidy in the offseason. That might have been a big deal because a big reason why they kind of fell apart towards the end of the series, their goalie was playing injured for most of the series, yet they never took him out until Game 7.
Yeah.
Hockey loves to disguise injuries. That's one of my biggest gripes with hockey, is they love to disguise injuries and say it's just an upper body or a lower body or a midsection injury. Not actually tell us what it is, not actually tell us the severity of it. That way that when this stuff comes out, we all get ticked off with them because they didn't rest the player that was injured all year. So it's just a prime example of that. Who knows if that would have changed their fortune that series? We'll never know. But
Yeah, Florida with the big 3-3 comeback there after game 4.
yeah,
That was pretty good for them. Like they win twice in overtime, and then kind of see. And game 6 they kind of got the 2-goal lead there, and then game 7 had to do it in overtime to win it all.
Well, that is the one good thing about a team like Florida. You're the last wild card in, and one advantage I think it is to be the worst team in the playoffs. You got nothing to lose. Nobody's got any expectations on you.
exactly.
Whereas last year with Florida, they were the second seed in the Atlantic, or sorry, was it the Atlantic or Metropolitan? I believe the Atlantic. And then they ended up losing to Tampa Bay in the second round. They got swept. So this time around, didn't have as much expectations. Nobody really thought they were going to do anything, and they come out and beat the best team in NHL history.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to see after how they were handled in the playoffs last year to bounce back, and now they're in the conference finals playing against another team that's, like you have said, Dash, is near its end of its highs.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. But
we will.
Speaking of teams that have gotten monkeys off their backs, concerning another series in the first round, the Toronto Maple Leafs, at long last, after over 20 years,
I was just going to mention
finally win a playoff series in 6 games over the Lightning, kind of avenging last year's 7-game series loss.
As a fan, go ahead.
I'm not gonna lie, when that game 6 went to overtime, especially after they had the 3-1 series lead, and then they lost game 5, then game 6 went to overtime. I thought if they lose this game in overtime, they're going to lose this series again.
Yeah.
They're going to go back. They're going to go back home and lose game 7 again. But thankfully, they were able to win in overtime at game 6 and finally end that curse.
Yeah. As a fan of all other teams that fail to win a series for many, many years, I understand Toronto's pain. So I'm happy for them, especially getting to down. I would say probably the NHL's big bad these days. There are a lot of people that don't like the Lightning just based on the fact that they did win 2 in a row, so which is already hard enough, and they still won't go away. They still won't leave the playoffs. It was good to see them go down, and it was good to see Toronto advance.
They just might have bit off more than they can chew when they
then they just
challenging Florida.
That party.
Their luck ran out. Their luck ran out real fast.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's not even luck. Like, I don't understand what happened to Toronto. Like, every other year we talk about them as being the good team on paper. They're the better team on paper, yet they keep losing. Again this year, they were definitely the better team on paper. They beat the Lightning the way they should have, and heading into the second round against the Panthers, who, again, Maple Leafs look way better than the Panthers heading into the series. And it wasn't even like they lost close. They didn't even make this a series. Losing in 5 games,
a 5 games.
Just humiliating fashion.
Yeah.
It's just not the way you want to go out after winning your first series.
Like,
you won your first series, but what does it mean now?
Yeah.
It's just
this series had steam to start because there was this whole thing like they weren't gonna, or maybe it was Tampa Bay and Florida series. Both of them had steam to begin because the arenas in which Florida and Tampa Bay played in were potentially not going to allow people or Toronto fans to buy tickets because they were in Canada.
That's dumb.
So that carried a little steam, and especially in the Florida series, just went way down real quick. So
it's just like you got your high hopes, you did it finally, and then you lose 3 games right away. That's gotta suck. Like, you finally broke the curse, and then the next 3 games you lose.
Yeah.
Well, and a part of me was kind of like, okay, now that they won the series, whatever happens from here, I guess I'm happy with them. They got their series win. But now looking back on it, I'm like, I don't know if I feel that way right now because, coming into the playoffs, I was expecting them to have to play Boston in the second round, and I was like, well, if they win against the Lightning and lose against Boston, I guess that's fine. But no, this is against Florida, the Panthers, And you would expect that they could, especially coming off of the highs of that series win, they'd be able to win it. Nope. Just bow out in 5 games.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At least they got the Game 4 win.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, but
yeah,
I don't know. That's you're grasping at straws there.
They didn't get swept, I guess.
Yeah,
they got the gentleman's sweep.
But yeah.
Whoop-de-doo. What I mean.
Don't worry, we'll talk about gentleman's sweeps later. I have one I want to talk about. So, well, let's I guess take a look at Carolina's journey to the Eastern Conference Finals. This is a team that I know Dash and I have been talking about for a little bit. That this is a team that's kind of on the edge of their cup window, one would say. They've been building a team here now for a while, and they've been in the playoffs, but they just haven't been quite able to cross that hump. So now that they're in the Eastern Conference playoffs, they potentially get their chance to try and get to the cup. They started out, they won in 6 games over the Islanders. You guys want to say more about that?
Yep, I mean, this was kind of to be expected. I mean, the Islanders sort of limped their way into the playoffs, and Carolina was definitely the better team. I will give credit to the Islanders, though, for trying to make this a series. They took it to 6 games and were in overtime away from taking it all the way to 7 games. So, just unfortunately, the Hurricanes were the stronger team and deserved the right to move on.
Oh, yeah. No harm, no foul in losing in 6 games. Go ahead, Cody.
Absolutely.
It's just I've kind of been cheering on Carolina. Like last year, watching the playoffs, I was kind of having Carolina as my sleeper team to win it all. And now, since made it this far, it's kind of nice to see that happening this year. So they're kind of my team to win it all this year. So hopefully they can do it.
Yeah, I mean they defeated another underdog team that I was happy with. They defeated the Devils in 5 games.
First things first. I mean the Devils got there, and it's weird to think about how the Devils got to the second round, because the team that I honestly thought was the best team in the East was the Rangers, and even though they were the 3rd seed in the Metropolitan, a lot of teams projected New York to be the team to beat heading in the East if Boston got eliminated, which Boston did get eliminated. So everybody was like, okay, this should be the Rangers' side to take now. Except the rebuilding, or I guess I shouldn't say rebuilding anymore. It's kind of like a brand new Devils team, but it's still kind of raw yet.
Yeah.
But they fell apart at the end. I mean, they only won Game 6 is because of penalties. That's the only reason they won Game 6. Otherwise, I feel like the Devils would have probably beaten them in 6.
If you watch the Rangers versus Devils first 2 games, you would have said the Rangers had it in the bag.
Oh, easily. I mean,
yeah, like 5-1 both games. That's a blowout.
And both games were in Jersey. So you think coming back home they could just be able to sweep the entire series? No, then they lose both games at home after that.
Yeah. Devils bounce back some.
Was this indeed the series that the home team could hardly win a game?
Well, the Devils won Game 5.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was just going to get to that. But yeah, the first 4 games, nobody could win a home game. And then, Game 5, Devils won, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Gosh, and then what a path. And then, Carolina takes care of them in 5. Really not much of a fight there.
I mean, that was kind of to be expected. I would figure that the Devils weren't going to exactly make a deep run, and I would hope that the Hurricanes could also try to make a deep run with what they have, and they thankfully have, as they won easily
so far.
Games.
Yeah.
Well, how did Devils score 8 though in Game 3? Like, what happened? What changed there?
That was the one weird outlier, and I don't know. Yeah. I mean, the Devils definitely have it in them to have some good games, but I mean, they must have used all of it up in Game 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and then the Panthers and the Hurricanes are playing for the Eastern Conference Finals. In fact, they're playing currently as we're filming this.
Dash, has anybody scored yet or no?
No, it's 0-0, and boy, I just was looking before. Florida's had at least, I think, 4 or 5 really good chances to score, and Carolina's goalie is doing a great job tonight so far from what I've seen. He's had a lot of good saves.
Okay. Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see who comes out of that series alive. I'm expecting it to go a while, but
yep, Florida hasn't made it to the finals since 1995. Carolina hasn't made it to the finals since 2006. So it's been a while for both of these teams.
They kind of seem like they both deserve it then.
Yeah. Always had a soft spot for both teams. They always seem like teams that are always kind of on the downhill. But Good for
Carolina
them.
does have their one cup in tow. Florida's looking for the first one ever.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that we've finished the Eastern Conference, we got like a minute here. So, who do we think is going to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals? I want to do predictions because why not? We always do predictions.
Yeah.
Dash, you can go first. Who do you think is going to make the Stanley Cup Final?
Starting with the East. It's interesting. I want to say, and I know that some people I've seen on the internet have talked about this too, that this year's Florida Panthers team reminds them a lot of the 2017 or 2018 Washington Capitals team that ended up winning the Stanley Cup. Barely made it into the playoffs, kind of overlooked. Everybody thought that their best chances were behind them, and then they somehow went on this magical run to take it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals and win the Stanley Cup Finals.
Right.
And I definitely could see that with Florida this year. But I personally think that Carolina, they got to be playing with some sort of fire right now, considering they have the home ice advantage, and they are very dangerous when they're in Carolina. I think that the Hurricanes should be able to win this series, I would imagine, in 6, but I could see it going to 7 games as well. And then meanwhile, for the West, that one's going to be very interesting to me. Peter DeBoer up against his old team that he just actually coached very recently.
Yep.
And Vegas, meanwhile, trying to cleanse that stench off of them. They got their brand new coach in Bruce Cassidy. And I think it's going to be Vegas's series to take. I think Dallas's defense has really been kind of a crutch for a handicap on them.
Yeah.
And I think it's what's going to cost them down the line here.
Yeah, I guess if I were to say anything about them, I'd probably go with I'd probably go with Carolina and Vegas. I tend to think the same thing as you Dash, about Dallas and Vegas. I've long time thought while the Wild and Dallas series was going on, that if Dallas were to win and then beat the Kraken after that they would have a lot of trouble in the finals, because I don't feel like they're a team that's built to contend this deep into the playoffs. I really don't. I really think they're going to fall flat, because I think they've lost some depth, and I don't really think they have the guns to go up against a team like Vegas, who really has put their stuff together this year. In Carolina, it's just going to be a battle to the end, and I think Carolina will have the guts to get out of that battle. Cody?
I'm going to sound like a broken record because I would think the same, because I think Carolina, I would say it's going to go to Game 7. Florida's going to make it interesting, and then Carolina just wins it at the end. I don't think blowout. It's probably just going to be 1-goal game. And then on the other side, I think Vegas can get it done in 5 or 6 games, because Dallas has shown that their defense is very weak. And what's the goalie's name for Dallas?
Ottinger.
Ottinger. He's got to be getting tired with how many saves he's for this team. So I would say it's going to be Vegas versus Carolina in the finals, and then I would say Carolina in 7 for that final.
All right, everybody, prepare for a Florida and Dallas finals.
Yep, probably.
Most likely, yeah. All right. Yeah, now we're going to move to another league that's caused a bunch of headaches, of course. The NBA. We're going to move to the Western Conference, so of course, Dash knows I'm going to want to talk about this quite a bit. So we're going to start off, obviously, with Denver's path to the Western Conference Finals. They first got through the Timberwolves in 5 games. This gives me an opportunity to talk about the play-in games, I guess. The Wolves make me shake my head every once in a while. They at least got to the play-in games.
You mean every
I guess.
while?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. They had the game. They had a huge lead on the Lakers in LA, and if it weren't for them to literally not be able to score for 10 straight minutes, they probably wouldn't have played the Nuggets, and they would have instead played the Grizzlies again. But instead, they lose. The Lakers go in to play the Grizzlies. The Wolves then beat the Thunder and blow them out and blow them back to Oklahoma City. And then, given that the Wolves had a few key players get hurt at the end of the year, they really didn't have the firepower, I guess, to battle with Denver for more than 5 games. They got blown out in Game 1. Now, I'll give them this. The next 4 were actually very competitive comparatively. It was a battle then, the next the next 4 games, the Wolves did give Denver a little bit of a battle. Of course, Denver won 3 of them to win in 5 games, but the Wolves got their home win, so that was good. I didn't expect much else. They're playing a 1 seed, so.
The thing with this is I almost went to one of these games because I was down in the cities during this time, and the people I was working with invited me to go to the Wolves game. I would just have to buy my ticket, and I didn't really want to. I'm not really an NBA fan. I'm a secondary Wolves fan. I'm a secondary Wolves fan. I'm more of a Celtics guy myself.
We'll talk about it later. Don't worry.
But and I was invited to go, and that was the game they actually won, right? The Wolves won at home.
They won Game 4. Yeah, they avoided being swept.
And I that was the one game that I was invited to go to, and I was like, I don't want to watch them get swept, so I stayed at home. But I didn't go. That's the thing.
I'm jealous because I wanted that opportunity too. But Dash, do you have enough time for your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of to be expected. Timberwolves were really banged up heading into this series. They just lost Jaden to punching a wall. Nas Reed was already injured. I mean, Rudy Gobert had that suspension recently. I mean, it just seemed like this team was a mess heading into the playoffs. And, I mean, Denver, they've seemed like the only team in the West that's heading into the playoffs. Denver seemed like the only team in the West that was competent enough to even make it far. But, I mean, my thoughts on that have kind of changed now. But, I mean, Denver's a very strong team, so it was going to be pretty hard for the AC to beat them.
One last thing is I feel actually somehow more positive about the Wolves than I did when they played the series based on how the playoffs have played out and the teams they played and where they've gone. But I suppose we can talk about the Suns now. So we got to talk about who Denver beat.
I mean, I really expected this to be more of a series. I don't really know what to do if I'm with the Clippers these days. I don't know what to do anymore. I mean, you got Kawhi Leonard. You had your deep run in 2021, and I thought maybe they were going to advance on that, but then obviously Kawhi got hurt, so that really kind of hampered them there, and it just seems like they haven't recovered from that.
Yeah, I mean, this seemed like a year where they maybe could push a little further. Like last year, they were the 8 seed, so likelihood of them going very far wasn't very high. But this year they got the 5 seed, so you're like, okay, can you get past the Suns, and then you get just contend with whoever's left.
They didn't even make the playoff. They didn't even make the playoffs last year. They lost in the play-in tournament.
Oh, they did. You're right. They lost to the
Pelicans.
They lost
to the Wolves. Yep, lost to the Wolves and lost to the Pelicans.
That's right. I for some reason thought they beat the Pelicans. Yeah. All right.
And they only won game 1 on the road in this series.
Yeah. It just fell apart after that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Then again, Phoenix wasn't very much better in the next series, but I mean, they won their home games, and those were a battle.
Westbrook went to the Clippers? I thought he went to the Nets. I'm dumb.
All I know is he didn't have any effect on it, so.
But meanwhile, that Nuggets-Suns series, I mean, you're talking about the Suns team that has really done everything they can to try to make some sort of all-in push. They got Durant now, and it's just unfortunately not enough.
Yeah.
You had guys like Ayton get injured during the series, and that was just kind of the death blow for them.
Yeah.
So now you have to kind of throw your hands up in the air if you're Phoenix and go, what can you do?
Well, you have to start realizing that your older guys are not getting any younger. Chris Paul is not the guy he used to be. As much as people want to imagine and think it into existence, Kevin Durant is not the same power forward he used to be. He's not the same guy anymore. He's getting old, guys. You can't just keep tossing him around to every team and think that at some point he's going to strike gold again. I'm growing increasingly convinced that his stint with the Warriors was probably his last hurrah, and that everything else after this is just trying to delay the inevitable. I mean, it's not like he's like 40 or older, but he's just not a spring chicken anymore. Kind of reminds me of Garnett later in his career, trying to get something out of it that really isn't there anymore. But any final thoughts before we move to the other side of the bracket? All right. Well, the Kings made the playoffs, and they snapped the longest active drought after the Wolves had their snapped curfews back. and we actually had a lot of hope for them. I mean, I know Dash and I were pretty excited when we saw the series begin because Sacramento won Game 1, and they seemed to be contending with them. Didn't they have a 2-1 lead at one point?
I mean,
2-0.
They had a 2-0 lead. Yeah, they
Yeah.
won both home games, and it was like, okay, they might be legitimate. And then Steph Curry and the Warriors did what Steph Curry and the Warriors usually do. And that is break everybody's hearts.
Yes.
Not the Lakers. Never the Lakers.
Apparently not. Ugh,
Or
we'll get to
LeBron.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah. You know, kills me. I was so hoping that Sacramento would manage to beat the Warriors. I wanted to see them move on. They've had such a long drought. That city deserves some time in the sun. They got to Game 7. But
Yeah,
Losing
it's
Game 7 at home, though.
Yeah,
Never feels good.
no, it doesn't.
it's just like the Kings. They were. Would you guys consider them a sleeper team this year or no?
I wouldn't even say they were a sleeper team. They were good enough where I felt they weren't even being slept on. I felt they were. A lot of people thought they would beat Golden State. Just because Golden State's kind of in this weird era where they're not quite sure if they're too old or too young. Like they don't know what they're doing. They don't know quite where they're going, so they're kind of going on borrowed time. It's just a matter of time now before they just collapse because they aren't infusing their team with new talent. They are one of the older teams in the NBA because they have been terrible at developing talent.
How long have Thompson, Curry, and
How long have they been there?
Green. Yeah, Green.
They've been, I want to say they've been there since, 2011, 2012.
Dang.
I think Curry was drafted in 2009. So, because that was the same draft that the Wolves drafted Johnny Flynn. So, and Ricky Rubio. So, yeah, I think that sounds right. I mean, because the Warriors have tried to develop talent. They've tried. I mean, I'm so gung-ho on the Wolves and Anthony Edwards, but we all forget the player that was drafted 2 picks after him was James Wiseman for the Warriors. And what has he done? They ended up releasing him. He's done nothing for them. Not worth the price of admission. So.
And meanwhile, the team that is also not worth the price of admission, the Memphis Grizzlies. Losing
They're
in
a
6
house
games
fire.
to the LA Lakers, and not just losing in 6 games, getting their proverbial butts whooped.
It's a miracle they
6
brought it to
games.
6, I think. Given how it turned out, it's a miracle they brought it to 6 games in the first place.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I know a lot of people are ticked off about the Lakers winning this series and going far, but Memphis had this coming for a long time.
Yes.
The antics of John Morant and Dylan Brooks all season long, I mean, they've had this coming to them.
They might not have
And I'm honestly happy.
They may not have either of
I'm
them
honestly
next
happier
season.
that the Lakers won. I'm honestly happier that the Lakers won. I feel like they deserve to move on more than Memphis did.
Yeah, but looking
I was
at the
gonna
rest
say this is the one series that I was happy the Lakers won.
Yeah, I don't know. Dash knows that I went into this series going, and it's a toss-up for who I want to win. I don't like either team. I really don't like the Grizzlies or the Lakers. On one hand, Dash, you talk about Brooks and John Morant. They may have to play with, or they may not be able to play with any of them next season. They're releasing Brooks and they're not signing him back. And Morant had another antics on Instagram, so now he's potentially going to get suspended for half an entire season.
He's taking shots, just not on the basketball court.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
That's a good one. I'll give you a golf clap.
See, we reap what we sow, though, because Dash wanted them to win over the Grizzlies, and then they won over the Warriors, and it's like, okay, I didn't want that.
No.
I didn't really want them to get to the conference finals.
No. Like if you remember at all this season, like at the beginning of the seasons, they were saying the Lakers were the top team, they're gonna go all the way. Right when the regular season start, Lakers suck. Westbrook can't work with James or Davis. They are not a team at all. And then somehow again, they figure it out. And the playoffs, and they get all the way to the conference finals.
Well, I will say this: it's not. I know that it's again, but it's the first time in a while. So, at least give them that.
They won the COVID year.
Yeah, but they made the COVID year as a top 4 seed. So it's not like they came out of nowhere.
First seed, but
They came out of nowhere.
But still,
it's not like they came out of nowhere. This year they did come out of nowhere.
I don't know. I don't know. If you studied the entire season, it's not like they came out of nowhere. It's just they had such a rough start to the season
Mm-hmm.
where everybody thought they were dead in the water. And then, like, halfway through the year, they picked themselves up and actually kind of looked like the second best team in the West heading into the playoffs. They just lost so much that they had to be the 7th seed.
Yep. All right, well, now we're going to flip the script here, and we're going to move on to the other side of the bracket. I know Dash and Cody want to talk. Well, Cody wants to talk about it. Dash probably could care less to see this bracket again. The Eastern Conference playoffs, and yep, we're gonna get it out of the way first. We're going to talk about Miami's path to the conference finals. Miami was initially the seventh in the standings going into the play-in tournament. They lost to Atlanta, so Atlanta goes on to play Boston.
Very, very rough loss at that. It's not even like they lost close. They were horrible in that game.
And then who was it they just barely beat for the 8th seed?
That was the Bulls.
Yeah.
Bulls.
They just barely... Well, actually, no, they did beat them, I think, by 15. But, I don't know.
It was close for a while. It was close for a while, and then they pulled away with like 4 minutes left.
Yeah. But then they make the playoffs, and they're going to play the Bucks. I know Dash was not happy that they were playing the Bucks. Yeah. Dash, you want to take it away on that one?
Well, I mean, I don't know how much confidence I had into this team heading into the tournament. I mean, what can you expect playing the 8th seed? Hey, at least we got our 1 win at home. No, okay, in all seriousness, yeah, this is a very, very disappointing series, though, for a Bucks team that honestly seemed like the best built one in this entire era. I'd say even better than our 2021 championship team. I mean, you got Jay Crowder at the deadline, you got Joe Ingles before the season to help out with depth. I mean, this team should have gone far. And unfortunately, it was just Eric Spoelstra out-coaching Mike Budenholzer once again. And it definitely showed itself in games 4 and 5 when Milwaukee dominated the first half of those games, only to just fall apart at the end because they failed to adjust at all.
Yeah.
And especially the Jimmy Butler, giving up over 55 points to Jimmy Butler in one of those games. And that's really what does you in, is when you just have these awful defensive performances. And awful defensive performances when you have Brook Lopez, who is considered to be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. So just a lot of situational blunders by the Bucks. And I mean, Miami, though, and like I said, they are the 8th seed, but I was scared of this team coming in because they're kind of like the Lakers on the other side, where they just had some rough stretches on the year, but when this team is good, they are one of the most dangerous teams in the entire league. And right now, they have, no pun intended, the Heat have been playing with tons of heat in this postseason.
They already have the 1-game lead, so.
Yep. Much to Cody's dismay. We'll get to them later.
Okay. Meanwhile, and the other side of that, you got the Cavs and Knicks. And, I really expected a lot more out of Cleveland in this series. I did not think that New York was going to be able to win this series, even in 7 games, much less the 5-game shellacking that they had.
Cleveland looks so much better during the season this year, and then just to fall flat on their faces in the first round as a 4 seed.
It was kind of nice. It was kind of nice to see the Knicks, though. It's like their first time in the playoffs for a while, and then they actually win the series.
Well, I can tell you why they're in the playoffs, though. But
well, they had a 4th seed a few years ago, but then they fell apart in the first round.
They're there because of Tom Thibodeau. That's why they're there.
I mean, the Cavs,
not Stephen A. Austin.
Last year they had a good start to the year. For most of the regular season, they were really, really good, and then just fell apart at the end of the year. And it feels like this is kind of the same thing again, except it took a week longer this time. It just started in the postseason.
Yeah. I mean, the Knicks are here because of Tom Thibodeau. He's basically the NBA's Peter DeBoer, except Peter DeBoer tends to win more frequently, may not go far in the playoffs. Tom Thibodeau did the same thing with the Timberwolves 5 years ago. Got rid of a bunch of players, brought in a bunch of different players, different executives, and went to the playoffs. Except the only difference this time is he actually was able to get better than an 8 seed. So I give this team a year or 2 before they just completely blow up, because that's typically how Tom's teams go. But we'll see how that goes. They don't have a Jimmy Butler, though, I guess.
This Knicks team isn't particularly strong. Either. I mean, they come out of the Eastern Conference, which is probably one of the weakest ones in the NBA. Not the Eastern Conference, the division that they're in. I apologize.
Yeah, I know what you mean now. The Atlantic, I think they are. Yeah.
The Atlantic division is pretty weak.
Yeah. And then they were kind of just an obstacle in Miami's way to get to the conference finals, to be honest.
Seriously.
Yeah, they really.
They had.
I mean, they brought it to 6, so there's that. But
Well, they had their chances to win this series. They honestly should have won Game 6 and taken it back to 7 games, but they just fell apart in that Game 6 where they lost 96-92. There's not a lot of NBA games anymore where a team scores less than 100 points and still wins it.
yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm. It's just with Miami, the 8th seed is in the conference finals. Like that's something to talk about right there.
Yep.
It's just that never really happens.
I believe it's the first time since, I want to say, 1996 when that happened, when the Knicks did it.
And it's also the first time ever that all 8 seeds have been represented in a round beyond the first round in an NBA playoffs between both conferences. All 8 seeds have been represented now.
And meanwhile, we head down to the... So let's get this one, this next first round series out of the way quick, since it was
very quick.
Pretty much this fast. The 76ers just dismantled the worst team probably that made the playoffs on both sides of the bracket, the Brooklyn
Yet
Nets.
somehow they were a 6th seed.
The only swept.
I agree, Nate. Even looking at their schedule, it still kind of boggles my mind how they ended up as a 6th seed. I know they had an easier schedule, but at the same time, everybody knew halfway through the year this team was going to suck in the second half of the year.
Yes.
The fact they still had a 6th seed, avoided the play-in tournament, and just to get their butts whooped by the 76ers in the first round.
Ben Simmons had a front row seat. He sat on the bench for all the games. It just made no sense to me.
It's just, Brooklyn, this just makes you look back on them. They had, it seems like now their one chance to do anything was 2021, and they ended up going out in the second round.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah,
it's gone now.
They had Harden. They had Prime Durant, and they still couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it was just I kept every time I was in office and ESPN was on in the background. It was just every time, almost every single day. It's just like, is Durant leaving or is Harden leaving? Till finally it actually happened.
Yeah.
And it just like, well, there goes the Nets, because it was just all every time they brought up the Nets, it was just those two and the coach.
Well, it always made
never
me
about
wonder.
the team.
Like, what's going on inside the Nets organization? Is the organization really that bad, or is it just Durant and Harden both were thought they were going to get something when they got to Brooklyn, and it just wasn't what they thought it was, and they just adamantly wanted out? I don't know what it is. They're gone now, but Brooklyn would do well to just tear it apart and start over. Sounds terrible.
It's kind of nice
fans,
that Harden got to beat the team they just left and swept them because he was on the Sixers.
Yeah, and then they got their handful in the conference semis.
And I mean, and then we go to the last series of the first round. I will give credit to Atlanta. They definitely gave Boston more than I thought they were going to be able to. I thought this was going to be the sweeping, kind of like how 76ers gave the Nets.
Yeah.
But we keep forgetting that Trae Young is an absolute talent. And he's kind of stuck on a Hawks team that really doesn't have much else.
I have my own opinions about Trae Young, but I'll reserve.
I was
going to
say I remember watching him in college, and he was a star.
Well, why? Why you don't think he's good?
He's got talent, but he's so focused on trying to exaggerate to get a call. That's, in my opinion, that's what's wrong with basketball today. That's what's wrong with the NBA. I'll never get over it.
That's what half of the game is.
I will never get over it. I watched the Wolves play the Hawks a while back, and Jaden McDaniels was standing right next to him, just straight up. And Trae exaggerates a move, doesn't even go into him, goes straight up and gets a call on a three-pointer. They did a replay. There was a huge amount of space between them. They never could make contact with each other. They called it a foul. So that's just a perfect example of, I guess, where I think basketball shouldn't be. And Trae Young's an example of that. He's a good player, but he just needs to focus more on actually making his shots instead of trying to sell a call. There was a while that he was making less shots because of that. His shot was suffering because he was trying to exaggerate all the time.
Well, I guess he has a good acting career afterwards then.
Yeah,
apparently.
exactly. Although he's in Atlanta, he's not in California.
Well, just wait.
Meanwhile, we head to the conference semis, and this was definitely an exciting series, at least for the first 5 games, because 76ers seemed like they had Boston on the ropes. Jason Tatum was not able to do anything this entire series, and even heading in.
I wasn't worried.
What?
I wasn't worried. Yeah, I was.
I was gonna say whatever.
Heading into Game 6 in Philadelphia, it definitely seemed like the 76ers had this under control, and when they lost that Game 6, it was literally just like last year with Boston. In the second round, they went down 3-2, had to go to Milwaukee last year, ended up winning that Game 6, and they did the same thing this time around, and I had just this bad feeling that they were going to win Game 7, and they did that again this year, and then they didn't just win Game 7. The third quarter was an absolute just...
Tatum
I don't even know what
up.
the word is for it. I mean, Tatum, yeah, they woke up the sleeping giant of Jason Tatum. 33-10 third quarter, and that was pretty much all she wrote for this series.
Yeah.
It was so nice to see that. And it was great to see it. I just remember though, I was gonna say it wasn't that game that I remember going out to Betos with you, Dash, and you were just one of the games we're on, and you kept telling me Tatum still hasn't made a shot, and it's the third quarter. And I was like,
Yes.
And it was Game 6.
All
it was
three of
Game
us were
6.
there.
It was a game it was Game 6, and it was the one that Boston won.
Yeah, and I was just like, are you kidding me? How has Tatum not made a shot yet? It's the third quarter.
But even then, the 76ers fell apart in the fourth quarter. Tatum still didn't make a lot of shots, but guys like Smart and Brown had to kind of carry them to victory in that game. And yeah, Tatum
that is also the only
7.
game that out of the series, no team got 100 points. Because the game final was 95-86.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do it like we did for the NHL then. Let's try new predictions here since we've reached the end. I'll go first this time, just so that makes it easy. Eastern Conference. I've always had a soft spot for Boston. For the Celtics, I watched them win their finals the last time they won the finals. So I have a soft spot for them. I'd like to see them win. Yep, with Kevin Garnett. That was my introduction to him. But I kind of hope they beat the Heat, also because I really don't like Jimmy Butler. I still really don't.
Hope you want to play some defense.
Oh my gosh, the Bleacher Report. And then in the West, well, I think I can just say for all of us here, I'd much rather see the Nuggets play in the finals than the Lakers. I mean, Lakers make the finals, it's just yawn. It's just another year. And then I would, those are my two teams in the finals. What about you guys?
Go ahead, Dash.
I think for the Eastern Conference, Boston on paper is definitely the stronger team, no doubt about it. I mean, you got guys like Tatum, you got Smart, you got Brown. This team, Al Horford has even been doing great this year at 37 years old. I mean, this team should no doubt be able to make it easily to the finals. However, this year has definitely proven to us that your paper isn't always correct.
Yeah.
And the fact that Miami has just been playing with some sort of fire under their butts the entire postseason, and Jimmy Butler has just had a postseason for the ages. I definitely think that, considering that Miami has already won Game 1, I think that he can take the series, not even in 7. I'm going to actually predict they take it in 6 over Boston. And then meanwhile, on the other side, it's really a toss-up for me. It depends what happens. The big factor for me is how well does Jokic do? If Jokic has a couple of duds in this next round, the Lakers are going to take the series easily. But if Jokic is prime Jokic for this entire series, I have no doubt in my mind that Denver can take it. So it's just a toss-up of what happens there. Yeah. I think after Game 1, I think Jokic looked great, so I'm going to go with the Nuggets winning the West.
Okay.
So I got Heat and Nuggets.
Cody?
I have to tell you guys, as a Celtics fan, I am scared because
He's
when
finally
I was younger,
scared, folks.
The first time I watched NBA playoffs and the first time I watched my Celtics, they had the terrific free Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and the team that they were playing was the Miami Heat.
They're terrific for free as well.
Yep, with LeBron James and I don't know the other two.
Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh.
Yep.
And just I was cheering on the Celtics all the way, and they lost. So I'm feeling Vietnam flashbacks a little bit. But the other thing is, like, I'm not just worried about this game. I'll be worried about if the Lakers win or the Nuggets win in the other side. The Celtics is a good team, but I have to pick the Celtics because I am a Celtics fan. I will say it's going to go to Game 7, and Celtics will win, and maybe even in overtime. And then I'm kind of hoping for the Nuggets because I don't really want to see LeBron James in another finals.
Fair.
But I have to cheer on my Celtics all the way and win the whole thing.
All right, well, it's time to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us today. We will be back more in the future. And next week, we're going to definitely try and do some NFL draft stuff since we missed that stuff too. So thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.